All right, let's listen to this. Cash Jordan, definitely go subscribe if you aren't already. He's incredible. Cash is spelled with a C. Let's go.
Okay, President Trump not only cracking down on illegal immigration by land, but also by sea. Cutters, aircraft, and specialized forces are being deployed to key areas, including Florida's coast, Hawaii, Alaska.
So as America locks down its southern border, those wishing to enter the country illegally need another option. And with almost 95,000 miles of shoreline, the U.S. maritime border looks like the best option for gangs and smugglers bringing people here against the law. But there's a problem, because while the greatest military in the world is locking down our land borders, the same thing's happening out at sea, and those attempting to come over that way now get caught and deported almost immediately after they set sail.
In the air and on the water, we spent the day with the Coast Guard as they patrolled the U.S.-Mexico border, the area of operation vast.
Right there, you can see the beginning of the border wall between the U.S. and Mexico. The most dangerous way to cross from Mexico to the U.S. is over the ocean.
What you're seeing here is video. This is the Coast Guard apprehending a vessel. This is part of the Trump administration's crackdown on illegal immigrants.
That's when we came across a spotter.
So he pretty much calls in, let them know, like, you got 2 Coast Guard boats coming up the way, so they know, like, whether to cross or not.
Almost all these pursuits and interdictions and encounters, they take place pitch black offshore.
They're blending in with all this traffic that you see out here.
Boats in disguise and increased maritime traffic overall make it difficult for authorities to know which vessels to stop.
What's going on now is they're chasing that boat, which is non-responsive, and they're going to try to get in front of it.
It's basically a dogfight on the water.
So illegal water crossings have a higher chance of being successful, but also involve a higher level of risk. And what nobody's talking about is the reason these are still happening is because no matter how much you lock down America's physical borders, the maritime borders are always going to remain open to an extent. Which means the gangs making billions bringing people and products illegally into America still have a way to scam others by selling them passage to a sanctuary city where they can attempt to live out a counterfeit version of the American dream, oftentimes working in an exploitive situation to pay back smuggling fees, which are now in the tens of thousands of dollars. But with the U.S. coastline now being relentlessly monitored both by sea and by air, those who wish to come across that way, well, the fees for that might get even higher. However, the country's coastline is so vast, and there's no way our military can cover entire swaths of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans at once. And just as our maritime border enforcement includes gathering intelligence and spying on these trafficking gangs before they leave port in their home countries, these smugglers are doing the exact same thing, watching our ships and patrol aircraft to find whatever holes they can in our ever-growing web that's designed to stop them. And that brings us to the real reason why this naval battle over America's coastline may go on for quite a while. People still want to come to America, and this might be their last chance to do it illegally. Plus, these gangs are perfectly happy using this opportunity to flood our country with devastating illegal products that also make them money, while wreaking havoc on our progressive inner cities, which have decriminalized the usage of such things in public. But many of these cities also have sanctuary laws that hide unlawful residents from the federal government, allowing them to live as part of a growing criminal underworld if they're willing to risk their lives to come here like this. There were 3 people clinging to that little rubber raft for dear life because the ship they were on capsized and the Coast Guard had to rescue them, revealing these smugglers care absolutely nothing for the people they're trafficking into America. If they make it in, great. If not, well, the cartel still got their money, which just empowers them to try again with others. And as you're about to see, the tactics they use to get around our maritime forces like the Coast Guard look like something out of a movie.
Incredible how close these boats get when they make those turns.
Sirens screaming, the boats turning those corkscrews in San Diego Bay. It's basically a dogfight on the water. They fire those warning shots, then use a paintball gun and practice disabling the engines.
All right, go.
That's absolutely insane. It's like a race where this boat is trying to outrun the Coast Guard and make it to a place where it can drop people off before they get stopped. And they're using this paintball gun right here to practice targeting the engine of this boat to shoot it and disable it so the thing can't move and it's just dead in the water. And although this might seem like overkill, the operators of these boats are dangerous gang members. They could be armed and they care absolutely nothing for anybody who's on board with them. And they put those people in grave danger to try and enter the country without permission.
No. That was a wild scene right there. Wow. Wow. At what point, there's always the argument that it's not an invasion. That's why they argue so much about what Donald Trump is doing in terms of getting people out of the country. But at what point does it become one? Like, these guys are racing to get into the country. The authorities are racing beside them, saying, hey, don't. And they're like, yes, we are. I don't care. These people gave me money, and I'm not a citizen either. I'm going to get in too. Then I'll leave, but I'm going to leave them all here. And you're not going to know who they are, and that's just how it's going to be. At what point do you classify that as an invasion? That sounds very invasive. That sounds like an invasion type of scenario. They're shooting these paintballs. They're trying to clog up the engine to stop the boat. What do you call that if that's not an invasion? Isn't that someone invading the country? Isn't it? That's so crazy. And so much more dangerous. I mean, the Darien Gap is dangerous because of who you could run into. And also a little bit because of the elements and whatnot. Could get bit by things and whatnot, but it's because of who you run into. This is way more dangerous just because you could just flip. Like you said, there's people holding on to that thing for dear life. The Coast Guard had to save them. If the Coast Guard wasn't there, maybe that wouldn't have happened, but maybe it still would have. And then the next thing you know, you're gone without a trace. Nobody even knows where you are. You just have family back in your home country just waiting on a call from you that they never receive. That's pretty crazy. That is pretty crazy, man. The military is very happy. They were like a pit bull in a cage, and everybody was poking them through the cage. They couldn't wait to get it. And Trump said, get them. Yeah, it's very true. There's a lot of that now. Yeah, especially the Border Patrol is probably really happy too. I mean, the flows stopped, but being able to just say, okay, this is a crime. We're not going to just let you in. It's probably a whole different feeling for them, because they can actually do their job properly. What's really wild is some military are involved in the smuggling, same as their cartels, ex-mercenaries, changing jobs, no matter what happens morally. It's a dirty game. Yeah, there's probably some of that too. I would think. But I don't know. This just looks so wild. You just roll up on a beach. A bunch of people are just at the beach. You're just running into the country. Just so unwelcomed. The authorities are like, no, don't come in here. And you're like, we're coming in. And then 6 months later, the ones that get in, they're like, I deserve to be here like anybody. What? I deserve to be here like anybody. It's like, buddy, no. No, you don't. That's very high tech compared to some boats. Yeah, 100%. They use crossing France and the UK. Yes, I have seen that. They're like almost paddle boats that they're using France and the UK. Yeah, I've seen exactly what you're talking about, man. Then they travel through North Ireland, no border guards, and into hotels for free. Wow, really? So they go through to crossing around France and the UK. So they travel through North Ireland to get there. Really? And then I guess some of them stop at the Northern Ireland because there's no border guards there. That's very interesting. I didn't know that, man. I didn't know that. Yeah, you're in Ireland, man. Hopefully Conor McGregor takes over out there. You know? We're coming into your country. We're coming in for free. You'll do nothing. You'll do nothing. You'll turn around. What you thinking? You'll do nothing here. I can't wait to see that guy become president. That'd be pretty solid if he did, honestly. I see him being very smart in the sense of he would probably just follow what Trump's doing. And he probably has his own ideas because he's living there and he knows people there. His family's there. He's Irish. He knows what's going on. But I see him following Trump's lead. Like, very, very much following Trump's lead. I think he would do well. I think he would do well. You know, Tucker Carlson has said, you know, when you have a leader and they love the population, but they aren't that smart, quote unquote, at the job, they don't know the job that well, it's better than having a leader who's very smart at the job, but doesn't care about the population at all. You know, an example of that is like the governor of California, you know, like just is very smart, very cunning, old school politician, but doesn't seem to care about the population at all. And you see what that leads to. And then you have somebody who's not really cut out for it, isn't really groomed to be a politician, someone like Trump, but seems to care a lot about the population and seems to be doing an excellent job, you know? Ron DeSantis is like that, you know, although he is very smart himself, but he seems to care a lot about the population of Florida. And then you see where that goes. You know, like caring about people is the key thing. And I think in politics that got thrown away long ago. And it's just about how cunning you can be and just getting ahead for yourself. It's a sad thing. I will tell you stories, bro. I would love to hear those stories if you got them. Nice impression. Gotta love Coach Colin. Yeah, that's the only thing I can say in an Irish accent. I get that's a hard accent. All right, let's keep going.
For anybody who's on board with them. And they put those people in grave danger to try and enter the country without permission.
Now, overall, across the U.S. border with Mexico in 2024, encounters with migrants was way down. Not so much in this sector, but as the rest of that border continues to be sealed up, there is concern in the Coast Guard that it could cause a so-called balloon effect, pushing more migrants to try the incredibly perilous journey to the U.S. by sea.
That's exactly what's happening. You've got 12,000 troops at the U.S. border right now. And all of those troops, they're an obstacle that's basically impassable. Crossings there are down 95% since Trump took office. You'll never get across the U.S. border now. We've got helicopters. They're using night vision. They're catching everyone and anything that tries to come through. And when they catch people, those folks get turned around and sent back to their home countries, sometimes within hours. This is literally a night and day difference between how things were just a couple of months ago. It's astounding. Here you can see an image of the border wall with buses full of people who are being deported and sent back. But this type of lockdown isn't possible out at sea where you can't wall off the ocean.
There's still a lot of water. Right there, you can see the beginning of the border wall between the U.S. and Mexico.
Look at this. The wall just stops. There's a gap. You could literally get yourself out here in a little craft and just make your way right around it if you wanted to. And that's what people are doing. But that's not the only problem. The boats people come across in don't exactly have a pirate's flag or other distinguishing mark on them to let the Coast Guard or whoever's watching know that they're trouble. In fact, smugglers do their best to disguise their boats so they don't look anything like a smuggling vessel. But their goal is to blend in with the traffic that's already out there on the ocean in things like fishing boats, trawlers, pleasure boats that might look like there's only a few people on board, but really are full of hidden compartments beneath where people are hiding.
Coast Guard members of the San Diego station talked about the immense job of patrolling these waters.
They're blending in with all this traffic that you see out here.
Boats in disguise and increased maritime traffic overall make it difficult for authorities to know which vessels to stop. 600.
Yeah, they're gonna have no idea who they need to stop. If everything looks normal and there's thousands of boats out there, how do you know what's what? And how do you even know where that boat may have come from? I'm sure all the time they stop folks who aren't smugglers or gang members, who will often just ditch whatever craft they came over in, which is why in some parts of the country you used to see these things littering beaches because the boat.
Wow, so wild. I didn't know this was a thing. Later, Prey. Thanks for coming out. But yeah, I didn't know this was such a prevalent thing going on. But I mean, it makes sense. You know, you stop the flow one place. Trump has stopped the flow pretty much entirely across the border. Then they're going to find other ways, you know, because, you know, if the cartel is the one smuggling like they are, then they want to make the money. So they're not going to stop. And also, people aren't going to want to stop coming into the country. You know, and in this way, I don't want to say it makes it more dangerous, but they become getaways. These are getaways. It's a huge business. Yeah, I heard it's like $15 billion a year or something like that. This is, yeah, it's almost, they become complete getaways. Because once they get in, like those guys that ran in, they just ran in. That's it. They probably have something set up for ID, something this, something that. It's just, they're in. And now you don't know where they are. You don't know who they are. You know, we have this idea that all these people are from Mexico or Latin America. South America. But that's not the case. These guys could be from anywhere. You don't even know their races. Don't know what languages they speak. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Wild. Yeah, that's very interesting. Again, Cash Jordan, if you want to check out that episode, it is called Migrants Give Up as a U.S. destroyer deploys to border.